This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And so we have come to this. It is now down to two teams that will be competing for the Larry O'Brien Trophy. It will be the Boston Celtics taking on the Dallas Mavericks to see who's going to hold up that chip. So many interesting storylines that is coming off of this matchup. But while the focus will be on the finals, we also have to make sure that we have to properly body up the two teams that unfortunately wound up getting waxed by the Celtics and the Mavericks. So this is a full slated edition of The Baseline. And as always, let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? What do you make of and if we go back to the beginning of the season when we did our predictions and everything like that, how are we looking so far in our assessments, our Calstradamus assessments?
I'm doing pretty well, all things considered. I think, going back, if we would have thought these would be the two teams in the NBA Finals, one of them we expected, or many expected, Vegas odds included. And Dallas, is the result of some massive changes at the trade deadline that have actually worked, for a team in the short term. It paid off immediately. So I think in terms of that, Dallas is maybe the surprise team, but by no way in shape or form are they now the team that is. I know they're still the underdogs in this series, but many will be picking them to win because they have what I would say is probably the two best offensive players in the series, not necessarily the two best players. We can obviously get to that later on. But obviously Luka and Kyrie are immense to deal with. But this is a great situation, I think, for the NBA to get two of the potential faces of the league, if you will, young guys, and Luka Doncic and Jayson Tatum, to be going up against each other here for both what would be their first NBA championship.
Well, this is a win-win situation. And to your point, we'll get into the preview in a moment. I'm going to put the big L right on top of my forehead. Because I clearly put no faith in the fact that the Celtics were going to figure out a way to make it past here, because I had so much faith in the idea that this was the revenge season for the Milwaukee Bucks. But we've already buried the Milwaukee Bucks, so we ain't going to get into that. Yeah. I will say, though, that because of what the Celtics have been able to accomplish this year and what the expectations are and have been for them through this season, it will enlighten me in the way that I am going with how we'll be doing our assessment of this NBA Finals. Either way you slice it, it is going to be must-see TV because, to your point, we have arguably some of the most dynamic offensive players with so many different styles participating in this NBA Finals. And so we'll get into all of that. We'll also get into our coveted autopsy, where we'll discuss the Indiana Pacers and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Two teams respectfully, you could say fought the good fight, but clearly they just ran into a better team, a better seasoned team or players that are better seasoned and are just ready for this. And all of the chirping, all of the, the talking and all that stuff can just, you can't overlook the fact that they were going to be tested, and they got tested. So we'll talk about both of those teams as well, too, in our autopsy report. As always, we appreciate everybody for hopping on board with this. Be sure to get my man Shaw, Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Game Face Lead. The show's Twitter handle, NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Go to www.thebaselinenba.com to catch up with this episode and all of our previous episodes. And you can also check us out on YouTube. If you see the blue and white logo in the top right-hand corner, that is the 19 Media Group family. We run in these content streets. So you can go to www.19mediagroup.com to check us and the family of great content creators that are covering your medulla and your earlobes. Let's get right into it, Shaw. Let's talk NBA Finals preview, Boston Celtics, Dallas Mavericks. One of the things that I think really stand out to me, and it's what I just mentioned earlier, is we are basically seeing 4 very unique styles of basketball played through these individuals between Tatum, Brown, Doncic, and Kyrie Irving. And what may make this an absolutely fun NBA Finals to witness is I think each and every single one of these guys will have their opportunity to shine. That the way that each of these teams play, which is very different from each other. And then we also have, supplementary characters, right? The Kristaps Porzingises, the PJ Washingtons, the Derek Lively, the Drew Holidays. There are so many casting parts. And I think it will be foolhardy if people's only focus is just on the star players who are obviously going to come out and ball. But if they are balling, people need to watch for the supplementary players, the role players, because I think that there is more than enough opportunity for them to get their shine in this year's finals.
I would agree with that 1,000%. It's interesting though, because I feel like Dallas's supporting cast started to, recess a little bit here in the conference finals, but maybe you'd expect that. And Luka and Kyrie had to do a lot of heavy lifting, but PJ Washington wasn't the same guy that he was in the OKC series. And maybe you can't expect him to be that, right? But Derek Lively played a bigger role. And I think this is where, for me, when we talk about basketball, and you and I, we have this conversation all the time, like the focus is so much on the offensive side of the basketball. Like we don't talk enough about the intangibles and screen setting and rebounding. And I know that's not sexy and what everybody wants to hear, but those are the things that get things done that free up those stars to score 28 and 30 and 35 points a game. So Derek Lively being a capable passer as a rookie center is a big situation, for the Dallas Mavericks. Daniel Gafford being an elite level rim protector is a great situation for the Dallas Mavericks. So I think, that's where this series can be won and lost, I think, for both teams. Boston's bench has been, I'd say, average at best, especially as we've gotten into the later rounds. We've seen less impact from guys like Sam Hauser. Peyton Pritchard, I think, has still been relatively hit himself. But a lot of that is because Porzingis has been out of the lineup for the last 5 weeks. And so Al Horford, who would usually come off the bench, gives you a different look and different dynamic as well, too. That should shift back, to normalcy to some degree for Boston, whether Porzingis ends up coming off the bench or Al does, going back into his normal role. But I really do love that point in terms of the bench guys will have a lot to say about how this series goes, as will obviously the main guys here. But it's the Holidays and Derek Whites, and I know they're not role players per se; they're elite starters, but they will have impacts on this series, and it won't necessarily just be offensively.
We'll get into our predictions in a little bit.
Yeah.
But I want to highlight a couple of things, not just in what you're saying, but also where my thought process was going when I first started. The reason why I brought this up just right off the bat is because this is the kind of NBA Finals that we hope to see. And it's been a while because everything that's been driven over the last, I want to say 7-8 years with the NBA Finals has really been predicated on people getting theirs, right? Just like the narrative right now. Kyrie Irving getting his without LeBron James. Luka Doncic, proving that, he, to me, had already proven, and I had said this, I had predicted this. I thought that the Atlanta Hawks missed in getting Luka Doncic when that trade happened and that the Mavericks struck gold, okay? And again, it's not a knock on Trae Young. I'm just saying for what the expectations were, this is what I was talking about. Now, if Luka can sustain this, there's going to be a very, very interesting discussion being had going into this next season about where we truly can see the greatness of Luka Doncic. Then we have Jayson Tatum, right? Missed this opportunity back in 2020, right? With 2022, the opportunity to win a chip. Jaylen Brown. Okay. All of these guys, wonderful. Kudos to them. The thing that really stands out when I think about this final, Shaw, is each of these guys and what they do and how they do it is going to determine how big of an impact the role players are. If you really think about it, the Boston Celtics defensively have the equalizer to what teams cannot do with a team like how the Mavericks are built, okay? You arguably have 4 players that are backcourt / front court style players in White, Holiday, Brown, and Tatum. You can interchange, alternate, and still be able to D up Luka and Kyrie Irving. And I'm not saying you're going to shut them down, but what I am saying is you have the opportunity to give multiple looks defensively in the course of a game, where as a coach, you don't have to lean on only Holiday sticking this guy, only White sticking that guy. You know what? This is an opportunity for the Jaylen Browns and Jayson Tatums to say, hey, let me get that dude. Hey, I'm going to lock him down on this key possession and have the confidence to do it. You would think that that would be an advantage for the Boston Celtics, because if you look at the rest of the other teams that were participating in this playoff situation, you cannot say with certainty that you had enough bodies or you had enough matchups from a defensive perspective to be able to hold your own against a team like how the Dallas Mavericks came into this year's playoffs.
Yeah, there's 2 points I want to piggyback off of what you said, right? The stars, in essence, will help dictate how the role players can ultimately play. And that's the case in every series, but I think even more so. So if Tatum and Luka get into I'm the next face of the league, I'm trying to be the MVP of the finals situation, that's probably not great for both teams, right? And I think both teams would not be playing to what their advantages are in terms of spreading it around. And then if Luka's in that means Kyrie's not getting as many touches, being able to be the creative genius that he is with the basketball. So that's something that I think that ultimately needs to be avoided, like immensely so. So I'm so concerned about that, more from Tatum's side because of all the slander that he's had in the 9 days off here as Boston leads up to it. People don't know what to talk about. So they're figuring out ways we can, pick apart the Celtics run so far and pick apart in some ways Tatum and Brown, I think, as individuals, while Luka and Kyrie are on riding this kind of this media high and this coming of age, and Kyrie just hates the redemption story. Like it's a very different narrative, I think, from depending how you're looking at it. And I'm not saying media is picking sides per se, because Boston is still favored to win the series. But in terms of the media darlings in this, the fan darlings of this is skewed tremendously towards Dallas's favor, which is an interesting, I think, development overall. That said, going back into the impact of what the role players will be able to do. Yes, Boston has the ability to defend in a way, and love what you said in terms of and Joe Mazzulla said too, we can't stop those guys, but you have to make it immensely difficult. You have to give them different looks. And I think on the other end, you have to continue to go at them, which is not something Minnesota did a great job of, and making Kyrie and Luka ultimately always having to defend. You have to involve them in actions on the other side.
And to your point, this is where I fear where the Boston Celtics can give a game or maybe even a series away, because the Celtics are so dogged in the way that they want to execute offensively, which is let the threes fly, that I think at times you bail out a team like the Dallas Mavericks, who I think you can get them on their heels, who I think you can get them reeling a little bit, get them shifting their energy, so to speak, to be more disciplined in the one thing that we thought was very shaky until the 2 trades were made in getting PJ Washington, and then the coming of age in Gafford, and then the coming of age with Lively. You can neutralize these things if you do not just only, just chuck the 3. You get what I mean? And when I say that, I'm not saying Celtics don't do what got them there. Them shooting the 3 and shooting at an effective clip, the Dallas Mavericks are going to see what a team looks like when they can shoot the 3. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they can shoot the 3 when they had to shoot the 3, but that was in, on this streak that they were in the playoffs. This isn't true. Their personnel wasn't crafted so that they can be chucking the 3 like that. What you'll see with the Boston Celtics is these dudes come in practicing chucking the 3. They go to sleep chucking the 3. They get up at the breakfast call chucking the 3. They wave the taxi cab with the 3. It's all going to be about the 3. But it's the type of 3s that the Boston Celtics take that I think make a difference in the way that they will allow their offense to execute. if they're chucking a three with clean looks and bodies going to the basket because they know who's getting that good shot, the Celtics can out-rebound, can give themselves opportunities. They can put themselves in the best position to take possessions away from the Dallas Mavericks, or more so put more pressure on executing every possession that the Dallas Mavericks have. But if the Celtics do what they were doing in the series against the Indiana Pacers and parts of the Cleveland Cavaliers series, which is them basically kind of like hanging around and watching Brown and Tatum dribble the life out of the basketball, then take like a fly out of nowhere 3-point shot with nobody crashing the boards, that's going to be a problem because it'll bail out the Mavericks, and the Mavericks themselves will be in position where their role players can do what they were doing in that series against the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah, for Boston, right? It's always about the quality looks that they get, and are they getting the paint touches and they getting things sprayed back out. From an outsider's point, and maybe even from a novice's point, you might say, well, with Gafford and Lively being somewhat elite, at least in the playoffs in terms of the rim protection, Boston's going to feel like there's no reason to go in there. But I think that's the exact opposite. You need to go in there. You need to challenge them. You need to get those defenses rolling and maybe even potentially in foul trouble. Like neither one of those guys have been there before either. So how do you know that they're going to just step up to the proverbial plate? And this is where Porzingis can play such a pivotal role because he can hit that midi. He can post up. And I think you need at least to have that optionality within your offense and be able to switch things up from time to time, which Mazzola is now showing some tendency to do. They have gotten a little bit more creative in what they do, especially defensively, but even somewhat offensively. And that's where Porzingis, to me, can really change the narrative from what we've seen even in the first three series with Boston, where they have been, obviously 4 or 5 guys out, and then it gets slowed down, a little bit too much isolation, et cetera, et cetera. Porzingis unlocks the vertical threat. He unlocks, that pinch post option, if you will, too. Back cut, all the, the drive and cut game he had with Jaylen Brown, all those things kind of come back into play that can not necessarily neutralize Gafford and Lively, but they can't just protect the rim. They're going to be involved in action. And I think that's how the Celtics ultimately can impact what is a much improved Dallas defense on that side of the basketball.
Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we'll give our predictions of who we think is going to hoist that trophy. And then we also got our coveted autopsy report. But first, are you ready to elevate your fantasy sports experience? With Prize Picks, you can win up to 100 times your money during the most thrilling time of the basketball season. Imagine turning a $10 entry into a whopping $1,000. The summer is full of sports, and there's no better time to get in on the action. Prize Picks is all about variety and excitement. Whether you're a fan of basketball, hockey, or even League of Legends, Prize Picks has you covered. You can mix and match your picks across sports like Jayson Tatum for more than 10 rebounds, Luka Doncic for more than 29 points, Clayton Clark for more than 3.5 three-pointers made, and Breanna Stewart for more than 23 points. This week, Prize Picks has a square going live for Game 1 of the NBA Finals. The square is if Jayson Tatum scores 1 point more than 0.5 points, that square wins. Users must add it as part of their lineup before the timer ends. Shaw and I grew up playing baseball, so we'd love to mix in a little variety with our picks from America's pastime. And for those of you who love a quick win, Prize Picks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Plus, with quick withdrawals and an enormous selection of players and stat types, it's no wonder Prize Picks is the go-to app for fantasy sports. So what are we waiting for? Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's right. Prize Picks will match your deposit, giving you more to play with. Remember, with Prize Picks, it's as simple as picking more or picking less. So let's get those entries in and watch the winnings roll. It's that easy. Don't forget to use your promo code CLNS to get your deposit match. And stay tuned for more basketball insights right here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Let's play and win together with Prize Picks. More Baseline, Callie, finals preview. Don't go away. We're back, Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and our discussion, NBA Finals preview, Dallas Mavericks, Boston Celtics. Only one can hoist the trophy. So, Shaw, we spoke about the dynamics, the twists and turns, a lot of the storylines. I want you to give me who you feel to be your X factor for this series. Not the person that you're going to be MVP. We'll get into that in a moment. But who do you find to be the X factor people should be looking at, but probably aren't talking about, who's going to be a pivotal key and for both sides, the Dallas Mavericks and for the Boston Celtics?
So, I mean, I think we know some of the main players, obviously. And I think from Dallas, we've spent a lot of time talking about Gafford, Lively's impact. Obviously, Luka, Kyrie. I think it's going to be, PJ Washington and Jaden Hardy. Like, what do those two guys do as role players coming into this series? Hardy is somebody who has the ability, as Josh Green. Like, they have a lot of guys who they may be playing off this bench. But Washington is obviously the starter here now, and somebody who I think has the ability to explode. And can give you 15 to 20 points a game, if given open looks. If they lock in on the main two, if you will, Boston does, Washington will have corner threes open all day. Not to mention Derek Jones, who's all of a sudden, really kind of come to life, especially when it comes to those corner threes. So Jason Kidd has a lot of weapons there. But I'm going to go with PJ Washington as a guy. I think Derek Jones Jr., probably being the secondary guy there. And from the Boston side, listen, I don't have a lot of faith in this bench in this series. And that's because I think if Hauser and or Pritchard are out there, they're just going to get picked on relentlessly. And that gives me a lot of pause for Joe Mazzulla to figure out a way to impact or to have an impact on this game with his bench. And I think it becomes more of a Derek White series and his ability to defend, but also be a two-way guy on the offensive side, is shooting the three and getting guys involved with some level of efficiency. I would hope to be wrong from the Boston side about that. I'd love to see Hauser and Pritchard specifically have a direct impact on this series, but I am fearful of them just being hunted like dogs every single possession that they're out there, where they become just completely unplayable. So to me, Derek White and Drew Holiday obviously become like kind of more of the keys for Boston, more so for what they can do defensively while still producing some offensively in an efficient manner.
Yeah, you bring up two interesting players for the Dallas Mavericks. So I was going to go Derek Jones and PJ Washington. I think whatever versions of what they can give you offensively, I think are key. Defensively, I think they'll be okay. However, I do know that when you're dealing with with the Drew Holidays, the Derek Whites, or even the Jaylen Browns of the world, that they're going to cause problems. And the style of play, I think, can be a problem for both Jones and for PJ Washington. We'll see how disciplined they stay out of foul trouble in order for them to be on the floor for maximum minutes for Jason Kidd to utilize, his roster the way he wants to. I'm going to say the X factor, Shaw, and it's not going to be a player. It's going to be Joe Mazzulla for the Boston Celtics, and how he deploys, his role players and how he deploys this roster. And the reason why I say this is because we saw in this last series when the Celtics took on the Indiana Pacers, and we saw also again when the Celtics took on the Cleveland Cavaliers, that there is clearly a problem with leaving Al Horford out on an island on the pick and rolls. Yeah. And the fact that I found that, to me, this is actually a better matchup for Al Horford in the way that he's playing his defense, that he can actually, it will not hurt as badly. Like if he was playing against, say, the Denver Nuggets, if he was playing against the Minnesota Timberwolves, this would be a problem. Athletic bigs, movable bigs. My question is, if Horford is going to get extended minutes, right? How badly will the Dallas Mavericks look to take advantage of that situation, that scenario? This is where I wanted to see Joe Mazzulla actually throw out Tillman, throw out a couple of different other looks, and he started doing that. I want to see how long he rides the Horford wave. I'm not knocking Horford. I want people to understand Horford is a valuable player, and he brings value to this basketball team. However, there comes a point in time, and we've seen this all across, if you play sports, just because you're a seasoned vet guy and there's loyalty there and they see you as a team captain doesn't mean that if you're trying to win a championship, you leave somebody out there so he actually becomes more of a liability than an asset to your team. And there has to be a point where Joe Mazzulla has to recognize where Horford is actually going to be hurting the Celtics rather than helping the Celtics. Now that you have Porzingis, there should be no reason why you're still leaving him out there in matchups and situations where clearly he compromises what you need defensively than what you're asking of him offensively. The Celtics have got more than enough guys to shoot the three. Not that I don't want Horford to shoot, but that's all that he does. He doesn't give you anything down on the blocks. So if you need players to go down there and get the opposing team in foul trouble, I want to see Mazzulla with conviction, pull the guys and put them in there to set up those situations rather than relying on someone to throw up Hail Mary 3-point shots or throw up 3-point shots in order to absolve what they're not giving you on the defensive end of the basketball court. That's just me.
Oh, let me just tap in on that one really quickly, because I think where Al can be effective if it's not necessarily, if he too also gets hunted defensively. That's not the thing. That's not to mention Porzingis could also get hunted defensively coming back from a calf strain. Absolutely. You don't think Luka's going to be like, come here, let me see what them legs about? Like there's going to be some real issues, I think, when Boston trying to figure those things out.
It has to be more aggressiveness on over the switch, like to say, screw the switch, I'm getting over this. And I don't care if Luka gets down. Let him get down. Let him get down deep. Let him, we'll get to the one last part before we get to our predictions. But go finish your point on that.
Yeah, but what I think where Al can be impactful is if he can give Boston extra possessions. Because while Boston is going to shoot a lot of threes, they've got to figure out a ways to rebound some of those threes. Al and Drew Holiday and Derek White, like those guys can get some of those long rebounds. We've seen Holiday come up with some immense rebounds too, but Al specifically, if he can figure out a way to be a plus offensive rebounder in this series, that can be immense for Boston, because I don't think they're going to be overly efficient. We haven't seen the Celtics, 50% 3-point shooting in the playoffs here. And while I know they are still confident that they have room to get there, I don't know that will magically appear in the NBA Finals. So rebounding, as is always key, but offensive rebounding, I think for Boston can really, really change the dynamic of the series. And Al Horford is a guy who might be able to do just that.
So one other thing that I wanted to bring up, Shaw, and I think this is key, and I'm going to say this is a positive, negative type situation here, is on the Dallas Mavericks side. Listen, the magic of Luka and Kyrie is phenomenal to watch. And at the same time, it could also be a tragedy as well, too. Those guys are going to have the ball in their hands. Those guys are prone to turn the basketball over. If the Celtics force Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving to rush themselves into what they don't want, it opens the opportunities for the Boston Celtics, to defensively hunker down and force guys who are not ready to take the shot to take the shot. It's kind of come a little easy because maybe those other teams like the Timberwolves, like the Oklahoma City Thunder, it came easy for them to excuse, hey, they're not going to hit that shot like that. We're going to leave them. Don't think that that's the case. If they are setting their guys up with confidence to put them in the best position possible to shoot the kind of shot they know that they can shoot, that's exactly what they're going to do. But if you're the Celtics and you force them to have to make that second or third option to let the clock wind itself down to such a degree without fouling now, to such a degree where they're hesitant to do the things that they think that they're going to do. It's almost like the Celtics anticipating what Luka and Kyrie are trying to do. You put them in that type of situation, they will turn the ball over because great players do that. They have it's almost like it's a trigger in their head of perfection. It's the utopian effect of playing sports. You want everything to fall right into place because you can see it before it even happens. And sometimes somebody, somehow, some way, the way that the ball swings, the play itself will shift that narrative. And now you got to think differently. And for Luka, this is a different animal because it is the NBA Finals. He came close. Now he's in it. And if you think about the numbers between, Tatum, Brown, Holiday, White, all of these guys have seen and smelt it, what it's like to be in the finals and to come up short or not come up short with Holiday winning the chip. But they know what it's like, right, to be in that situation. Luka doesn't. Kyrie does. That's a lot of weight to just put on one dude for him to bring along a guy like Luka and the rest of that team to a situation, to a place that they're unfamiliar with. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see.
Yeah, well, if the Celtics can find a way to have Luka and Kyrie just continue at it, to coin a phrase from Mark Jones, like their do-it-yourself kits the entire series, where now they lose confidence in those role players and those other guys, that plays to the Celtics, proverbial advantages. But I'm just not sure if Boston is going to be able to get enough good offensive looks. And I think this series, for Boston's standpoint, needs to be more in the low hundreds, while they've been a team that scores in the 110, 115 or whatever. I don't think you want to get into an offensive, shootout with Luka and Kyrie leading the helm on the other side of the basketball. But this Dallas team is very well equipped. Jason Kidd has done an amazing job to get them this far. It takes, big brass balls to be sitting Tim Hardaway Jr. down in this situation as well, too. He's like just not out of the rotation. And I think, if things were to go awry, it's a card he could play, later on in the series in order to try to get some spacing and to give a different dynamic.
Hardaway Jr. doesn't play in the series. I'd be shocked.
Yeah. I mean, I'm shocked he's not playing at all, but I mean, exactly that too. And I think with Dallas, and getting Kleber back was immense. And while he's not quite himself, all this time off should hopefully get him back. I made a joke on, the Believe in Celtics podcast. It looks like he literally has like a gun holster on his shoulder, so he's having a hard time letting that thing, fire. But, with this time off, he might be able to come back there and give them another spacing threat as well, too. And then you have three 6'10", 7-foot guys who you can deploy out there at all times. And that gives Dallas a distinct advantage. I just don't know if Mazzulla will be able to counteract that. And in what way does he? Because do they go small? Does Tatum play some more 5 in this series? All those things are things I'm eager to kind of watch out and see, because I think this is two very evenly matched up teams with a lot to prove, especially when it comes to the legacy of some 2 superstars in Luka Doncic and Jayson Tatum.
All right, Shaw, who you got now?
Yeah, so I'm dubbing this, the finals of legacy and supremacy. I'm gonna go homerism here. And I think if things go the way they're supposed to go in terms of Boston's overall depth, they can win this thing in 6. I don't trust them in a 7-game series with not having the best offensive player on the floor. And again, I think Tatum maybe he's still not the best player on in the series, but I don't think it's as far away as people are saying, because again, Luka's offense is so far superior, but Tatum's defense is 1,000 times better than Luka's. So Tatum, I think, can be one of the, if not the best player in the series. He doesn't need to do that on the offensive side to prove that. Does that make sense? So I got Celtics in 6, but this is going to be a hard fought series.
Yeah, it's going to be a hard fought series. I have the Celtics in 7. I know that this sounds crazy when people were asking me about, wouldn't I want the Minnesota Timberwolves more than I would want the Dallas Mavericks? And I just honestly feel like I would want the Dallas Mavericks more. Not, again, there's ancillary things, the whole Kyrie situation in Boston. It's not about any of that. It's about the matchups. It's about where the opportunities are for what your team does so well that it's priority that they do it well. And it's easy because you know who you're dealing with in order for you to do it well. Right. To me, this has always been about the Celtics defense. This has never been about their offense. Okay. And the only reason why I, bitch and complain about the way that the Celtics operate offensively is because it just feels like there's this lackadaisicalness that tends to also affect what they do defensively. It doesn't make them a good team from a transitional standpoint when they're just camping around the 3-point line. I think because now they're playing in this type of series, almost like it's mirroring what happened to them against the Golden State Warriors, it is going to force them to step up and be engaged every single second minute of this NBA Finals and to not squander the opportunity. And for me, giving the Dallas Mavericks 7 games, to your point, I don't know if I completely trust the Celtics in a 7-game series, but I have to trust that in a 7-game series, the Celtics, barring anyone getting injured and some freak accidents happening, the Celtics have the horses to put the pressure on a team like the Dallas Mavericks. They have the matchups that they can interchangeably work to their advantage. And I think that to me is going to be the key. If we want to validate whether or not Joe Mazzulla deserves to be the head coach, he deserves, and if they win, give this man his flowers, because where most of us question whether or not he was making the right call or the right moves, it's got him this far. Now I think it's going to be ultimately tested against a good head coach like Jason Kidd. And we can argue about the fact that the Dallas Mavericks may have actually a better depth, like a team more deep when 100% healthy than the Boston Celtics. But if Mazzulla deploys his players out there and those guys go out and execute when it matters the most and do the things that are necessary for them to get these wins, I'll ride the Boston Celtics in this one going 7.
All right. Well, this is a great matchup, I think, for NBA fans.
It's a prize pick 'em.
Yeah, pick more, pick less, for sure. And I do hope, I hope we get a great series, and I hope we don't get too much of the machismo, if you will. Like I said, we want to see bravado, right? But we don't want to see it be at the detriment of good team basketball. And I think that's where I'm slightly concerned from Boston's standpoint, because there's nobody questioning, like, as great as Kyrie is, no one's questioning whether Kyrie's better than Luka. Kyrie's not questioning that. Like, Luka's like clearly the guy. Just because Jaylen Brown won the Eastern Conference MVP is like, oh, we're back to that stage in Boston. Is Jaylen Brown better than Jayson Tatum? Who's more clutch? And
again,
like, there's a lot of noise. It's a lot of noise, unfortunately, and Celtics have to filter that out to get the championship.
It's an unfortunate noise that's being. I think where it's coming from, I think, is the problem, Shaw. Like, if it's the fandom, that's one thing, but when it's coming from the main media, the mainstream media outlets, it's almost as if it's like a slap in the face for the people who really, truly, and properly understand the dynamic of how we get to this point now with the NBA Finals. Look,
let's go.
All right. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, Shaw and I got two teams to body up in our coveted autopsy report. We talk Pacers and Timberwolves. Don't go away. We are back. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA and our coveted autopsy report. Just finished talking NBA Finals preview between the Celtics and the Mavs. So let's go right into the let's get our hands dirty, Shaw. Our hands were pretty clean then when we started talking finals. Now let's get them dirty with our autopsy report, talking Pacers and Timberwolves. So we'll first talk about the Indiana Pacers, Shaw. Look, you could make this a Cinderella story for what they were able to accomplish this season. I don't think anybody expected the type of turnaround when looking in totality, the way that the Indiana Pacers just came out of the gate, them, getting to the in-season tournament finals, them basically participating in the Eastern Conference Finals. Look, man, the future is absolutely bright for the Indiana Pacers if we can see them replicating what they were able to do. They've obviously got a lot to work on, okay, when it comes to their personnel, their roster, and how they are defensively against other teams. But I don't think anybody can question that this style of offense that Carlisle is implemented with Halliburton at captaining this thing. This is the kind of offense that I think Indiana Pacers fans, faithful, and the Indiana Pacers themselves going to be loving for the next few years. And who knows, that might actually draw some free agency attention. They want to come run up and down the court like freaking thoroughbreds, night in, night out through the course of a regular season.
I mean, well, it all starts with them being able to retain Siakam, and you don't figure they don't make that move understanding that he's, the wink agreement that he'll at least stay there, and probably sign a full 4 or 5 year max. As long as that happens, yes, this team should be right back in the thick of things. I know a lot of people don't feel like they deserve to be here, and yes, they faced a hobbled Milwaukee team, and then by the time they got out of the Knicks series, the Knicks basically had you and I playing, and I understand all of those things. But there's nothing to take nothing away from their ability to score the basketball. They did improve defensively, especially after the in-season tournament. Rick Carlisle realized like that was the only way that this was going to be tenable for them to have a deep playoff run. And those things happened. And they also didn't have Benedict Mathurin, a key wing player for them, who they were intended to rely on. So the sky is the limit, if you will, I think, for this Pacers team. Again, Siakam returning, Mathurin coming back healthy. What do they do with Obi Toppin? Not quite sure there. They have McConnell on a contract for 1 more year. Nembhard is somebody who think they were going to want to try to integrate more, especially what you saw him do in the last part of the Eastern Conference Finals there too. And I like Isaiah Jackson, sorry, and obviously Aaron Nesmith as well too. So to me, they have the nice balance of role players, all-star level talent, and coaching that can be a problem in the Eastern Conference for many years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. I don't know what people are complaining about, with what happened between the Pacers and the Knicks. Well, I agree, the Knicks didn't have enough bodies, but damn it. This is what happens when you have a team that loves to run and a team that really doesn't love to run. Okay. You run them out the gym. You run them into injury. You force the coach to run them to the ground. Okay. I mean, unfortunately, that's what happened. And that's part of the dynamics of the different coaching styles in the NBA. So I don't want people, taking away what the Indiana Pacers earned in what they did in that semifinals matchup against the New York Knicks. You know what I'm saying? And if you were the Boston Celtics, you did exactly what you were supposed to do against a team that lost their top player. You forced the other guys to do what they were not capable of doing. That's what teams do. So I just think that people have to pump the brakes a little bit on whether or not. Now, if you want to say what the Indiana Pacers can they do through the course of a regular season, okay, now with this constructed roster, let's go. But I can guarantee you this. There's not going to be a whole lot of variation from what you saw the second half of the season with Siakam in this roster from what you will see going into next season. And that's what's going to make the Indiana Pacers a dangerous basketball team. They've got young legs, and they actually have a legit deep roster. They can go 1 through 12. It's a question of how does Carlisle make these necessary adjustments? Who's going to improve come next year? Like, take the next leap. Because I can guarantee you something, Shaw. To me, I think something was raised and elevated. While Aaron Nesmith, tough-minded kid, love him to death, inconsistency shooting that basketball. We saw Nembhard take a step forward as somebody who might actually be better as a starter next to Halliburton. Okay? And then you've got McConnell in the backup. Nesmith, if he figures out a way to be a solid wing guy, like could be like that bulldog, and you can maybe operate with 3 guards if necessary. So there's a lot to play with the way Carlisle can kind of form this roster. They're starting 5. You can even start Siakam at the 5. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of ways you can go, and that versatility doesn't come about until you see what you saw from the Indiana Pacers, in this run that they made.
Yeah, I think this is a team that will run it back, if you will, like this next year. Get Siakam back in tow, as alluded to, but Miles Turner's on the last year of his deal going in next year. So they will have some decisions to make, I think, as will TJ McConnell, unless those guys get deals done this year over the course of the summer in terms of those extensions. But they have some time, in essence, to at least play itself out and say, like, all right, well, who are we really? And I like the idea of Halliburton, Nembhard, Mathurin, Siakam, and Turner being your starting 5 next year with, with super, super great role players. Again, we always talk about it doesn't have to be like the most offensive minded guy coming off your bench, but energy guys like McConnell and Nesmith coming off your bench, like that's huge for them. And then again, you get Isaiah Jackson coming off that bench. Ben Shepherd showed some chops here this year as well too. And then if you keep Obi Toppin, so I think you have a nice 8-9 guys who, like you said, allows the Pacers to just really come at you in waves and keep the energy up at all times, no matter who was out there. Nothing to hang their head at this year. Great season. Hope Halliburton can stay healthy, moving into the latter parts of his career here, or the next stage of his career, not latter parts, but next stage of his career. And then getting everybody some other opportunities to continue to shine there. I think Carlisle is an underrated coach. I think everyone knows he's a good coach, but just how good he was to get them this far. But I know a lot of people say Missoula outcoached him in the Eastern Conference Finals, especially when it came to that late game execution. But those are things too. I think as you're commanding and leading a new team, he'll be better at that. He even himself going into next year. So sky's the limit for the Indiana Pacers, man. I think they're going to be right in the thick of things moving forward.
Absolutely. One last point, Shaw, and it's something that I'm very curious of. Clearly, we know that this is Tyrese Halliburton's team, and one of the things that I think really helped Halliburton, elevate himself into star status, right? I'm not going to jump out yet and just say superstar, but help him come out in star status is this platform of what he basically did against the New York Knicks, right? Like it's taken him to like another level. The one thing that I think is going to concern me is let's remember too, that the Indiana Pacers really rolled the dice in bringing a guy like Pascal Siakam. I think Pascal Siakam in Indiana is a perfect place. I do not see Pascal Siakam being that kind of guy like OG Anunoby was to the New York Knicks, right? Like I see him in a way where in a small market, he can really elevate himself and he can run alongside and help build and fortify what that future could look like. Halliburton has to be very careful that he doesn't stargaze himself to the point that he's forgetting the dudes that are riding with him You know what I'm saying? Like, I think he just wants to, I'm just saying he should tread a little carefully. You know what I mean? Because come next year, you know, there are going to be expectations, right? Everybody is expecting the Pacers to usurp the Milwaukee Bucks next year. They think that, you know, the Pacers prove that they can play the Milwaukee Bucks. And we don't know what version of the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be coming in this offseason. But I really am going to be interested to see how Halliburton now on this level, on this tier, really galvanizes and pushes his team, get his team focused, and see if all of them are all on that same page with the expectations of getting right back to the same place that they were, that they just got exited out of, which is the Eastern Conference Finals. Because I really think that stardom hits differently, especially in small markets, especially when you have executives making the kind of deals and moves that they've just recently made to really bolster this basketball team.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a cautionary tale there too. I can't remember, did Halliburton make the Olympic team? Because even that, I think, you know, if he has the opportunity, even if it's just to go to the camp in the summer, yeah, I mean, continue to sharpen his skills, if you will. Those things in terms of being around those guys who are also leaders on their respective organizations can trickle back into what he brings to Indiana next season as well too.
Absolutely. All right, Shaw, let's go ahead and move right on over to the next slab, which is the Minnesota Timberwolves. They unfortunately, you know, people could say they ran out of gas. They just got outmatched. They were probably too high on the hog of knocking off the defending champions. But the Minnesota Timberwolves had the exit stage left against really, you know, one of the most formidable backcourt combinations that we'll probably see in our lifetime or our generation, with Luka, Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and this Dallas Mavericks team, who just played on another level. And while I give kudos to Anthony Edwards, a kid all but 22 years old, you know, who basically came out of nowhere and took a team that was arguably supposed to be Karl Anthony Towns' team, I honestly feel like if you are the Minnesota Timberwolves, I think you should be very, very leery about how this team is being set up, and think about what you're building around. Are you building around Anthony Edwards, or are you building around Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert? And I'm gonna tell you right now, if I'm talking to Minnesota Timberwolves fans and Minnesota Timberwolves executives, be careful how I worded that question, because whatever response you give to me and to anyone who hears that question might actually be the undoing of your team for the next 5 or 6 years.
Wow. You know, Cal, here's my thing. So I've had the opportunity to speak on a couple of different platforms more recently here, obviously playoffs picking up or whatever. And the Timberwolves came up on one show I was on, and it was like, yeah, the Timberwolves are effing expensive. You know, $186 million in committed salary. They need to resign Kyle Anderson, probably need to resign, you know, Monty Morris as well too. And that pushes them over whatever, right? But now it's the Cat question. Is Cat really a true number 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? My thing is, like, what's the difference between Minnesota and Sacramento, right? In terms of, like, they haven't had prolonged success. So now that they finally had a little bit of success, we're talking about breaking them up. I can't get there. I can't. And I understand that Cat didn't perform to the level that many would have expected a $50 million a year player to do. I get that as well. But Ant is also only 22. And I think his ability to step into more of the alpha role, which he's already, as you alluded to, snatched from Cat, and Cat had to be like, you know what, bro, you got it. I think that's something that you need to at least play out, at least for another season. Okay. I don't think you're going into the summer saying, hey, we need to shop Karl Anthony Towns. And again, as always, if you get an offer you can't refuse, fine, I get all of that. But you haven't made the conference finals in 20 plus years. You know, before this, 2 years ago, you hadn't made the NBA playoffs, you know, and however many years before that as well, too. So I just think it's like, all right, well, once you start to get a little bit of success, now it is my terminology. Everyone wants to throw accelerant. Well, now that's what you got to do. And you got to do it this way. You got to do it this way. And you could very easily reverse skate by tinkering too much. And I think, you know, with Towns and Gobert proving everybody wrong from last year, remember that, because I think everyone's forgotten that. There's no way this can work. They got to trade one of those two guys. They stayed the course and got to the Western Conference Finals and upset the NBA champions. So why isn't grace given to the Timberwolves in essence to continue to play themselves out here a little bit, at least for another year or so, despite the salary that, yeah, I know it's going to command, but if the ownership, you know, if he pulled the contract he will from A-Rod and company because, hey, they were talking about potentially breaking this team up, well, that means to me that, hey, you know what? They want to see what this team can ultimately do. And I think that should be applauded and not discredited in any capacity.
Absolutely. Okay, so the reason why I asked that question, Shaw, is because you have to think about where the hierarchy sits with this team. And the reason why I say that is because if, let's just say we use the comparison of the Boston Celtics, you can make the argument that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown came in hand. They literally were like 1 year apart from each other when it came to the draft. Okay. So they grew up and went through their growing pains together. Okay. If we are believing that you're building the team around Anthony Edwards, I'm not saying break up Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. I'm saying make sure that what you're building around is maximizing Anthony Edwards being the guy who is helping and putting this, like helping this team there. If you want to say Mike Conley is kind of like that Drew Holiday for you, I'm all with that. I'm not saying just totally trash it all. But what I am saying is when you've got guys chirping who don't need to be chirping, when you got guys saying things that really don't need to be saying stuff, that's when you know it's on Anthony Edwards and the rest of those guys. It's like, that's not how we do this. That's not how this is going to play. That's not how we got to where we got to. Okay. And so the reason why I brought up all of this, Shaw, is because you have to address the situation that will come about when you have Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert on the floor at the same time with the type of matchups now that you're seeing when they play against the Dallas Mavericks, when they play against, listen, that was on the Denver Nuggets and they just had nobody after their starting five. But you can be rest assured if they re-up with what they've got for their starting five and they actually add those role players that needs to be on there, are we really going to be having the same kind of conversation about how both Towns and Rudy Gobert executed in what they were supposed to be doing through the course of this run? It's not to say that the Timberwolves didn't deserve to be here, Shaw. What I'm saying is don't get too high on the hog because of what you did this season, that we've seen them go ahead and tailspin their ass right back to where they started from. Remember, it wasn't too long ago the Timberwolves had been in the playoffs, and then they wound up being the second to worst team in their own division the following season with the same star players. So that's what I'm saying is if you know who your alpha is, your alpha has to be on these guys to be like, hey, let's assume that we got lucky and let's prove to people that this is firm. This is true. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think it's so much as about the money as much as it is the mentality when it comes to the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah, well, I don't think they have an identity problem in terms of, you know, with Ant or Cat or Gobert or Conley. Conley understands, hey, I'm the veteran guy, the stabilizing force, the old head. You know, the young guys are keeping me exactly that. You know, these young guys are keeping me young. You know, and Ant is the vocal and on the court leader here, and Cat provides some semblance of perspective as a guy who's been in the league for a little while himself here too. But he knows they only go as Ant goes, and Ant is going to continue to go further each year because he's going to see, and he has seen now, hey, what does it mean to be the guy? What does it mean to be the guy in the playoffs, the conference finals? You know, sweeping Kevin Durant and Devin Booker is a huge accomplishment. Beating the defending champs is a huge accomplishment. Losing in 5 games in the Western Conference final, maybe not a huge accomplishment, but getting there is an accomplishment in itself. And now he has the understanding. To me, it is what they were debunking at the end of that Nugget series. I think Vincent Goodwill had asked them, and usually young teams need to go through the da-da-da-da-da and the cat and like, well, we already done losing, da-da-da-da-da. They were riding maybe a little bit too high at that point. Maybe a little bit too high at that point. And now they know what Vincent Goodwill was trying to ask them in that section. Like, hey, we still have some lumps to take, and now we've taken our lumps and hopefully can get over the proverbial hump. But they got to stay together.
My last point, because you know, Shaw, how I am about this idea that you got to go and always get players sometimes instead of letting the players mature. I'm going to say this because I think this, to me, to your point, is going to be important. And because they are going to be salary strapped, cap strapped it's going to leave very little room. But if you are the Minnesota Timberwolves, you need to address getting a veteran big guy, a sound defensive big guy who can come in and can really help both Gobert and both Karl-Anthony Towns. And the reason why I say this is because while this team was great defensively, especially in their playoff runs, the foul trouble that both Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns got themselves in. And when I say this to be respectful because it's what happens. But there comes a point where this no longer is, okay, I can do it on my own, or they're going to figure it out. You need to either put a body on there to show you how it gets done in those situations, or you need a player presence to show them how they should be disciplined in their ability to not foul as much as they had been fouling and the silly types of fouls that they found themselves in during the course of their runs. If what I'm saying, Shaw, is you're not going to put any investment in changing up the dynamic, you definitely have to put the investment on shoring up what got them in trouble to begin with. And again, this is going to rear its ugly head if you're going to continue to roll out both Gobert and Towns. The both of them cannot get in the kind of foul trouble that they consistently get themselves in. And this has been plaguing them their whole career so far. This isn't just a one out of the ordinary thing or just because the Dallas Mavericks had the kind of matchups they've had. This has been a problem that has plagued both Gobert and Towns through their career. And it rears its ugly head when you're validating them for getting an award or getting accolades. People are like, why are they getting these accolades? They can't even stay on the basketball court long enough. And to me, that is something that is going to be critical in this offseason if they expect to take the next step.
I would only counter that with the aspect of like when you have four bigs, because you forget Naz Reid is playing, you know, in that 4 and 5 role too.
He's
like
the
it's
same
just
way.
like, I mean, how are they going to play all those guys? And I think if you're using it as an insurance model, then surely, but it would be difficult, I think, to get all those guys the requisite minutes, unless you're saying they continue to be in foul trouble. Then you have that more of that rotation going in. To me, Minnesota doesn't necessarily need more defense. They might need more size, but they don't necessarily need more defense as much as they need more scoring. And where I don't care where it comes from. Because when Towns is in foul trouble, then it's just Ant really just trying to do it by himself. And, you know, Naz Reid is not creating a whole lot of offense for himself. To me, they need some more wing shooting or some, you know, something behind Conley that's a true, you know.
But then you're saying they should re-sign Kyle Anderson and Monty Morris. Why do that?
I
And
don't
they
know.
should really just, okay.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I don't think Kyle Anderson answers any of those questions.
Oh, no, but that's what I'm saying. Like in the beginning, you made it sound like you wanted them to get, you know, they're going to have to re-sign those. Like, you don't have to re-sign those guys. To your point, they're going to need more shooting. But I also believe
it's easier for them to re-sign those guys because they have their bird rights. So,
but
they need differences.
I don't mind them going out getting themselves a 3-and-D guy if the guy does shoot the three at a high clip. But it's somebody that you can leave on the basketball court because Towns and Gobert and Naz Reid can't keep themselves out of foul trouble.
I don't know if Naz Reid has the same foul trouble that but Cat is by far and away the worst of the group, by far and away.
No, Papi, no, please, no, I
that's definitely his movements for sure. So anyway, you know, it's I don't want to tear them down too much. They made it to the Western Conference Finals. They were one of the better teams in the league this entire season. Best defensive team in terms of, at least on paper, and net rating, et cetera, et cetera. Second in coach of the year. Mike Conley won a teammate of the year. We're defensive player of the year. A lot of accolades for this Minnesota Timberwolves team. And that's why it perplexes me when some, not necessarily you, but some say, oh, they need to break it up because, you know, they're never going to go any further than this. It's like, you didn't think they would be here. Didn't you think they'd even be here? So, like, why would they listen to anybody else at this stage? Because everybody told them to break it up last year.
And again, the upside is with a 22-year-old player like an Anthony Edwards, he can keep that together, because he can essentially make them better. It's a question of, do they want to be better? And when they get to a point where they can do it on their own, Shaw, that's what's going to make the Minnesota Timberwolves a championship caliber team. But in the meantime, ride that young gun right now. Just ride that young gun and build around the fact that they have to improve on the things that unfortunately failed them in their run to the NBA Finals. This has been an awesome show, my man. Good stuff, man. We covered two teams alive. We covered 2 live body teams that are still standing, and we covered 2 dead teams. I'm telling you, man, nobody crosses things over better than us. Maybe Beetlejuice, but nobody crosses the living and the dead better than us.
Well, I'm excited for the NBA Finals. Hope our fans and listeners are as well. Please let us know your predictions. Celtics, Mavs. Let us know your thoughts on the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Indiana Pacers and what they should potentially do in the offseason. But it was nice to see these 4 teams being the elite of the elite. While not all of them were expected to be here, we got what we got. And I still think there's a lot to be taken away from what these teams were able to do. And then hopefully what will be a great NBA Finals as well.
Absolutely, man. And once again, hey, NBA Finals still there. All kinds of sports, WNBA and Major League Baseball, tennis. There's so much going on. So if you're a person who likes to get in on the action, make sure you go to Prize Picks. Remember, use the promo code CLNS and their first bet, 100% match deposit. So don't forget to do that. Get in on it. Get in with us, man. We're going to probably get down on it as well, too, with the NBA Finals just around the corner. For the Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hopping on board with us this week. Catch up with you next time.